Dear Mr. President Joe Biden, I will not comply to your mandate. Although today is September the 11th and literally the 20th anniversary from a day that will live in infamy, even more so than Pearl Harbor, and a day that most Americans will never forget during their lifetime, or those who lived during it, Generation X, Boomers, and many Zoomers. I feel as though when on September the 9th, you issued one of the biggest warning shots in this battle or in this war that will also live on in infamy for the day that really changed things when you said this.
My job as president is to protect all Americans. So tonight, I'm announcing that the Department of Labor is developing an emergency rule to require all employers with 100 or more employees that together employ over 80 million workers to ensure their workforces are fully vaccinated or show a negative test at least once a week. Some of the biggest companies are already requiring this. United Airlines, Disney, Tyson's Food, and even Fox News. The bottom line, we're going to protect vaccinated workers from unvaccinated coworkers.
And I really feel as though you are declaring war against the American people. And I predicted this months ago. They were saying the quiet things out loud and letting us know what their playbook was. And I talked about this in this video you can go ahead and definitely check out. But you definitely are daring us to succeed and or want to rise up against you when you went even further and said this.
And all school officials trying to do the right thing by our children, I'll always be on your side. Let me be blunt. My plan also takes on elected officials in states that are undermining you in these life-saving actions. Right now, local school officials are trying to keep children safe in a pandemic while their governor picks a fight with them and even threatens their salaries or their jobs. Talk about bullying in schools. If they'll not help, if these governors won't help us beat the pandemic, I'll use my power as president to get them out of the way.
That you'll go after and remove governors? Now, I'm here in the great country of Texas, and I gotta say, it's been great. It's like live or let live. And despite what many of the Democrats in this state are saying, a lot of growing liberals or transplanted liberals about Governor Greg Abbott, he's doing a great job at allowing Texans to live and let live, to do what they want, the freedom to decide whether or not to wear a mask or not to wear a mask, to not mandate any vaccination requirements, to do a lot of basic things. He's definitely adhering to the majority in his country, not the overwhelming, because again, I would say Trump won the election or won the state of Texas closer than almost any other Republican president in recent history or in many decades. But it's still a pretty much overwhelming majority, especially when you look at the actual number of counties and not just the number of people who are populated in cities like San Antonio, Houston, Austin, and Dallas-Fort Worth area. It's a live and let live. And you're talking about coming after governors like Greg Abbott, like Ron DeSantis, and the 24 other state governors that are already declaring that they will fight back and push back against this mandate. And this will be a battle, one way or another. It looks like definitely in the courts. And you're also trying to strong arm us into, saying, if you do not bow and bend the knee and get this jab, we will come after your livelihood. We've already heard them talking about restricting our freedoms and our rights and things that we can just normally do, such as entering to public areas. But then that was something that a lot of these blue states and their cities were definitely doing to some detriment. Especially, it's funny how just last year, and even just within the past couple of months, they've been arguing that voter IDs are somehow racist because it disproportionately affects Black people in particular. somehow, out of all of the POCs, black people are somehow the most disenfranchised and unable to get a state ID of any kind, whether it be a driver's license, state ID, whatsoever, to vote, because it was keeping us from voting. And yet somehow, despite the fact that it's already been shown all across the country, even in Liberal Haven, New York City, where practically 70% of the black population in that city is unvaccinated, and despite knowing that that's a disparity, you're saying, okay, well, state IDs are somehow impossible to get and are a greater hardship for people of color. But vaccination passport or ID card, vaccine card, is somehow more attainable. Make that make sense. They really flipped on that. But now you're also threatening our livelihoods, which I think is really going to make a lot of people rise up, because a lot of Americans who are, for instance, unjabbed have nothing really against those who choose to get jabbed. In fact, for instance, I would fight for the right for an individual to be able to have easy access to the vaccine and to get it, especially depending on their situation. I would always say consult with your doctor, because your situation, your health is very unique and different to you. And I supported, for instance, my parents too. I cheered them on for getting it, especially because they're in their early 60s, not in the best of shape. All of the demographics that have succumbed to the virus in greater severity, or had more severe cases and or symptoms to the virus versus someone of my general age, health, and fitness level. So I'm all for that. But now you're putting it in a position where there's no choice. You're actually putting it upon us. And I think a lot of those who have been jabbed already are also starting to peak the game and say, what's going on here? I don't support that. I've been jabbed myself. That's what they would say, not me. But they may say they've been jabbed themselves, but they do not support this strong arm tactic where you're coming after our livelihoods. And that is not all right in any way, shape, or form. Last I recall, this was the United States of America, land of the free, home of the brave. Land of the free is literally in the first two words of that phrase, and yet there is no freedom here, no freedom to choose what you can and cannot put into your body, especially since it's already been proven in the country of Israel, the most vaccinated country in all of the world, with well over 81%, maybe 82% of the country received the vaccination and were previously considered fully vaccinated, and yet as of now, they're having practically nothing but record breakthrough cases, seeing the highest number of COVID cases than they've ever seen, period, which goes to show that the jab's efficiency is no longer there. It wears out. You can still contract the virus just as easily with or without the jab, and you can still transmit it as per the CDC leak back 2 months ago that they mentioned. It's playing out in Israel to the point where their health directors and leaders are saying, you know what, 2 jabs, 2 doses is no longer considered fully vaccinated. And we also have to start looking at natural herd immunity as a potential thing, and a successful thing at that. So Israel and the CDC leak have already proved you can still get it and transmit it just as easily based upon the numbers out there. It's not that pandemic of the unvaccinated, which is a lie that Biden was definitely putting out there. Israel, again, is debunking that. Then, okay, the argument is, well, it's to protect you. Well, shouldn't that decision be on me? If it's already been proven that I am no more at risk of getting it and then transmitting it to someone else than someone who is jabbed, then shouldn't it be my decision to whether or not if I want to better protect myself? Which again, then the question becomes, are all people, all demographics have the same equal risk and or receive the same exact outcome? And the answer is categorically no. You can look at the survival rate based upon the age, and it's been pretty much true throughout this whole thing. The risk of fatality amongst the young is statistically 0. It's practically nil. It does spike up little by little the older you get, but it's really only worse when you get to your 50s and plus. But the number of cases are astronomically the majority of people in their 20s and 30s, and yet you look at the fatalities, it's always a majority of people 60 and up, with people in their 50s also making a significant percentage of that number as well. younger people under 50 are not as great of risk of severe symptoms and or fatality. It's largely to do with your age and general health. Let's not also forget obese people and overweight, because there is a difference. If you're also overweight and or obese, you also are more likely to have severe symptoms, if not succumb to the virus largely. Look at all of the people who they try to put as poster childs for the regretfully unvaccinated are always people who are in their 50s, strike one, and are always overweight, strike two. Same thing with a lot of the kids. There have been more kids who have died in drownings over the course of the last 18 months, 12 months, 8 months, whatever time frame you want to put. More kids died in drownings during the course of this pandemic at any point in time than they did of the virus, despite what they're trying to do and scare everyone. You talk about the protecting kids, but every study shows kids, youths are not at the greater risk. It's, if anything, the adults, the teachers, kids can get it. They can be super spreaders themselves, but not succumb to the greatest of illnesses unless if they are unhealthy, which is an unfortunate reality for a lot of young Americans, as a growing number of kids are growing up more obese. Now, what's also frightening about Joe Biden's mandate is it wasn't really clear as to whether or not are there any exceptions to that rule. For instance, the company I work for, me and my department are 100% remote and have been since the start of the pandemic, with no indications of, or no plans whatsoever, that is, of returning back to the office no time soon. So much so that they've even expanded job offerings to individuals all over the country, no matter what state you're in, which is unique because they've always, up to now, always hired for people who were within the same city of the office. But now that they've opened it up to people all over the country, there's no way those individuals can go to an office. And for many of them, there's not even an office within 5 hours of where they live. So no plans or intentions for my department to return back to the office. But my company has already mandated or made it a policy so far in the phase one, as they do start bringing more and more people back into the office, they are requiring those who are returning back to the office now to be vaccinated. But again, it's just those who are returning to the office or for those who wish to go into the office. Nothing about the remotes. Biden issued a very blank statement regarding 100% vaccination for all of the staff, for any employers employing 100 or more employees. And is that going to include the remotes? And why should it? We're already seeing that, I'm hearing in some cases in some healthcare industries, where individuals who work fully remote, but because they work at a dialysis center, which receives federal funding and fell under the earlier mandates already, are being required. Doesn't really make sense, but we're seeing that already happening. Is the federal government now going to require employers to force their employees to either get vaccinated and or get regular testing every week at a minimum, even while they're at home 100%? And then the thing about that testing, who's going to pay for that? Who's going to cover that cost is the other thought. I'm like, I would be okay with the regular testing. I mean, it would be stupid and it would be a waste of time, or time consuming unnecessarily. But then who's going to ultimately pay for that? I don't see the employer covering the cost. I don't see the insurance company covering that cost for a regular weekly and or maybe a bi-weekly, but not a weekly testing. And so they'll pass that on to the employee, making it, again, almost virtually impossible to be able to maintain one's employment. So this is definitely going to get real. I feel as though the bells of war have definitely been called. I have no problem with a peaceful divorce. I think that we're long past that point. Not that they would ever let that happen. They've gotten so drunk on power and they want everyone to comply and bow down to this Agenda 2030 that, a peaceful divorce would never be feasible. But it's the only real solution if the federal government is going to overreach to this extent, because I honestly don't even think they have the legal authority to do what he does. but they have been shown that they will bypass any legal measures, create the crisis in order to break the law. Now that they've shown that so many in the public, and especially the mainstream media, will cover for them during a crisis to break the law, that they're now saying, you know what, we can just break the law in order to maintain some semblance of security, because they'll give up their rights. So let's create the crisis in order to break the law, is what I'm seeing going on right now, especially when it came to the moratorium on the evictions. You know, despite the fact that the Supreme Court had already earlier knocked down the CDC's ability to do that, they still went ahead, the CDC that is, after the fact, and tried to extend the eviction moratorium. You know, they don't really care about the rule of law, and there's no way Biden has that authority to, or should not have that authority to force private companies to do this. We already knew that there was a cabal or collusion amongst many of these liberal-led companies to force their employees to comply, like Biden did read off the list of different companies, and shouldn't be shocked that Fox News was one of them. So you see that collaboration going on, but I guess it wasn't enough, and so they needed to push the pedal to the metal a little bit more. But again, he is so overreaching on his authority. It is scary. He's becoming the tyrant that the Federalist Papers and the Constitution warned about, but let's see what's going to happen. That's my video. If you like the channel, please go ahead and subscribe to my channel. Help support the revolution and the movement. If you like this video, also don't forget to smash on that like button, subscribe to this channel, comment on this video, share this video. This is Bruce the Boss, and I'm out. Peace.